This instructional video will focus on the guidelines for Paper 2, Poetry in Context, a cultural or historical context research essay, as well as a research tutorial that will focus on our LibGuide. Paper 2 is a research essay. For the task and purpose, the purpose is to write an essay that explores the cultural or historical context of a poem and analyzes how the speakers and/or events in the poem are affected by the culture or by the time period. Your analysis will demonstrate that you have done extensive research on the culture or history relating to the poem, and that you have used the knowledge gained from the research to interpret the poem, or poems if you're working with more than one. Essentially, this essay should be a blend of a report on a particular time or culture and an analysis of the poem or poems. You should explain the connections between the historical or cultural facts and what occurs in the poem. You do have a lot of flexibility in choosing your topic for this research essay. I do understand, though, that it can be difficult to get started when you're faced with the task of choosing a topic that will work for an entire research paper. So below, I've included a list of sample topics. You can choose from this list, but you are not required to. And if you do work with one of the topics, feel free to change up the authors or the poems that you're working with. So here are just some of the samples below. Sherman Alexie, Evolution and/or How to Write the Great American Indian Novel. And this is connected to the Native American or American Indian literary renaissance. Of course, you can work with other American Indian writers if you would like to, and still focus on this cultural movement. We also have the Civil Rights Movement. Langston Hughes, Dinner Guest Me and/or Birmingham Sunday. Dudley Randall, Ballad of Birmingham. James A. Emanuel, Emmett Till. And same thing goes for the Civil Rights Movement. If you have other poems or authors that you would like to work with that are connected to the Civil Rights Movement, you can, of course, make those changes. We have the Harlem Renaissance with Langston Hughes' I Too and/or The Negro Speaks of Rivers. World War I poems, World War II poems. We have a poem that's connected to the World Trade Center attacks of September 11, 2011 by Billy Collins. It's a poem called The Names. We have the feminist movement, and then we also have multiculturalism. There are different facets of multiculturalism, so this one is specifically focusing on cultural identity and language, and it's a poem that's included in our textbook. So as I said before, feel free to choose from this list if you would like to, but you do not have to. If you have some ideas of your own, feel free to explore those ideas. And of course, you can always email me if you're not sure about a topic, but it's something that you're interested in. I won't read through every single detail in the guidelines. However, I do need to go over the research requirements. You will conduct research for this essay on a poem or poems and a cultural issue or historical time period that is connected to the poem or poems. You will need to find a minimum of 4 secondary sources. This is in addition to the primary literary text, the poem or poems that you're analyzing, which means you will have a grand total of 5 sources. Now, if you're working with more than one poem, you of course would have more sources. So if you're working with 3 sources, you would have a minimum of 7 total on your works cited page. The 4 secondary sources must come from the library resources, print books, ebooks, and/or databases. Not meeting the 5 source requirement will result in deductions from the final grade. It's 10 points per missing source. So please do make sure that you find those 4 secondary sources in addition to the primary source, and that you also get your sources from the library. Please refer to our LibGuide to get started on research. There is a link to our LibGuide included under week 6 in our course. Each source must be documented on a works cited page. Because this is a research assignment, I need to see that you can document research appropriately. So failure to include a works cited page will result in an automatic 0 on the essay. If you need help documenting according to MLA format, you can use Chapter 7 in our textbook, the Purdue OWL's MLA Style Guide, and/or the Citing Your Sources tab on our LibGuide to help you document your sources correctly. You do need to incorporate direct quotes in the essay to support your argument or analysis. These quotes will come from both the primary literary text, the poem or poems, and the sources you find during research. For each quote or each section of paraphrased information, you need a parenthetical in-text citation that refers to the source on the works cited page. Again, because this is a research paper and I need to know that you know how to document your sources appropriately, failure to include an in-text citation at any point in the paper will result in a 0 on the essay. Include cited material from each source at least once in your essay, and you do need to incorporate direct quotes, so you can't just paraphrase all of the information. There is a note at the bottom: errors on the works cited page will result in a deduction from the final grade of the essay, so please make sure you format it correctly and that you do include a works cited page in order to receive credit for the essay. Read through the writing process. The most important part of this to begin with is to look at the example essays. This is included in the selection from Chapter 3 that is assigned under Week 6. And this section is called Writing About a Work's Cultural Context. There are 2 different sample essays that will give you a good idea of what this essay should look like. From that point on, you can decide on the cultural movement or historical period and the poem or poems that you're working with, and you can get started on your research. The formal requirements are the same as the first paper: 12-point Times New Roman font, 1-inch margins, double-spaced text. You need your heading, your header, a creative and original title, and you need in-text citations and a works cited page. The difference for this paper is the minimum length and suggested length. Minimum length is 4 full pages. If the paper does not meet the minimum length requirement, you will not receive credit, so make sure that your paper is at least 4 full pages. Your essay can be longer than 7 pages. The recommended length is 5 to 7, but just make sure you're not rambling. These are the due dates. The rough draft due date is Monday, November 7th. You'll submit your rough draft to Peermark. The following day, beginning at noon, you will be able to access the Peermark workshop assignment, and that is where you will give feedback to your peers who have submitted their rough drafts. You need to complete that Peermark workshop assignment by Thursday, November 10th at 11:59 p.m. And then the final draft is due on Sunday, November 13th by 11:59 p.m. Please note that this paper is worth 20% of your final grade in the course, so it's important that you get started on it early and that you let me know what questions you have and if you need any assistance in writing this paper. The next 2 pages are the content rubric, which is very similar to paper 1, so please read through that because it is similar in terms of setup, but the skills that we are working on and that I'm assessing are different. And then the grammar rubric is exactly the same as paper 1. The content codes are a little bit different since this is the research essay, so make sure that you read through those content codes. And again, this is just a reminder, when I grade your paper on Turnitin.com, you will see either letters or numbers within the comments on your essay. If you see letters, those are content comments, and then if you see numbers, then those represent grammatical errors. So for example, if you see a 2, you know that's a comma error, and then you look to see if it's a 2A or 2B or 2C, so on and so forth. So these codes will help you. I also give you comments that are specific to your unique topic and analysis. However, the comments that I tend to make repeatedly over and over across several different papers are represented by these codes, letters for content and then numbers for grammar. This section of the video lecture will go over research tips. This is our LibGuide, which is essentially a guide to research for our English 102 course. At the top of the page, you can see that there are different tabs. There's the home page, there are print books, and these are all of the books that are available on the different campuses of Horry Georgetown Technical College. There are ebooks, and we have an extensive online ebook collection. EBSCO ebook collection and then the eBrary ebook collection are the 2 most popular and ones that you will be able to find great resources through. And then we also have databases. At the top of the page, you can find a basic definition of what a database is. And then you can also click to view a complete list of Horry Georgetown Technical College Library's 90+ databases. On the left side of the page is a list of tips for combining search terms. If you look through these tips, you can use them in order to get better results as you're conducting research. For this paper, you might have to be a little bit creative with how you search and conduct research. Because you are working with a specific movement or time period, you should search by that movement title or by that specific era or event. For example, you might search for feminism or feminist movement. You can also search for the civil rights movement, which is a specific period of time in U.S. history. or you could search for World War I. And those are very general, but it can at least give you some background information on the specific cultural movement or time period that you're working with. You can also search by author name if the author's works are strongly connected to a specific movement or time period. So for example, many of Langston Hughes's poems are strongly connected to the Harlem Renaissance. However, he also has post-Harlem Renaissance poems, some of which are connected to the Civil Rights Movement. So doing a basic search of Langston Hughes will tell you a little bit about his life and the time periods in which he was writing. So you can use that technique, but it depends on which poems you're working with and who the authors are of those poems. So let's talk about a few of the most useful databases for this assignment. In the middle of the page, you can see databases under English composition and literature. At the top of that column are 3 different databases, and next to each one is listed Best Bet. My 2 favorite are Bloom's Literary Reference Center and Literature Resource Center. So I'm going to click on both of those and just take you on a little tour of each one. This is Bloom's Literature. Whether you're working with a specific historical time period or a specific movement, this is going to be a good database for you to use to get started. So I'm going to just search for the Civil Rights Movement. Let's say that I'm interested in working with Langston Hughes's poetry or one of the other poets who was writing during that time, and I just want to find basic information on the Civil Rights Movement. If I type in that search, you can see all results. You can also see biographies, overviews and synopses, analyses and criticism, topics and themes, and then images and videos. So you can scroll down, but this is going to be a pretty comprehensive list. You can see there's 1,590 results. And if you click on these different categories, it'll narrow it down a little bit for you. Under topics and themes, you can see Civil Rights Movement, and it says historical events. And then you can also see that there's the Civil Rights Movement and specific authors listed. So I could do a search for Civil Rights Movement and Langston Hughes to see if I got any results that way. I'm going to click on just the general Civil Rights Movement link. And under here, you can see there's information about the Civil Rights Movement. And if I scroll down, you can see that your search terms will be highlighted. At the bottom of the page, I would like to draw your attention to citation information. One of the really nice things about databases is that you don't have to create your works cited entries on your own. So you can make sure that you're selecting either MLA or Chicago Manual of Style, and you want to select MLA because we're using MLA documentation style. And from here, you can actually highlight the works cited entry and then copy and paste it onto your works cited page. So if you know that you're going to use this source in your paper, you can go ahead and add that to your works cited page and keep track of it. There are also some really useful tools on the top right side of the page. Save is not a tool that I recommend using because you have to be logged into a specific account. However, email is a really good tool. If you find an article that you think you might want to use, you can email it to yourself. And you can also print it if you would prefer to keep hard copies with you. If you need the text to be bigger or smaller, you can increase or decrease the size. And then there's also the citation link. So if you click that, it will show you how to cite that source, like I was just explaining to you. So I can also try a more specific combination of search terms, such as Langston Hughes and Harlem Renaissance. And here you can see there's 388 results, so this is a little more specific. And if you scroll down, you can see that there are several biographies. So if you find one biography that doesn't seem to be as helpful, you can always look at some other ones. Because as you can see, there's a long list. There's also a section that's called Harlem Renaissance under Literary Movements, Groups, and Eras. And there's several of those as well. So this is a pretty useful tool in terms of finding general background information or even specific information about authors. In addition to specific time periods or movements, you can also type in that specific cultural movement like feminism. And here we just have some background information about feminism, so 1800 to the present, and we have terms and definitions. We have feminism in French literature, so sometimes the search results get very specific. And again, it's all organized according to these categories at the top of the page. Literature Resource Center is organized pretty similarly, and we'll try the same type of search. So we'll try Langston Hughes. And Harlem Renaissance. Here, the categories are a little more specific. We've got literature criticism. There's also biographies, just like Bloom's. There's topic and work overview. So there's actually specific overviews of works written by Langston Hughes. There's reviews and news. And then there's primary sources and literary works. This section is one that I particularly like, the work overviews. So for example, if I was working with Langston Hughes' poem, The Weary Blues, I could click on this, and then I could see an introduction to that specific poem, and then a breakdown of what's going on in the lines. So this could be useful to you. One thing I will warn you of, though, is that there is an analysis of the poem within the overview, so you need to make sure that you're not just repeating what this author is already saying. This database has very similar tools. There are citation tools. If you click on that, you can select which type of citation you're looking for. Again, you're looking for MLA. It also has email, so you can email it to yourself. If you click download, and if you have Google Drive, your view of OneDrive, this is really nice because you can save it directly to your Google Drive if you're working on a personal computer. You can print, and then you can also do highlights and notes. If you prefer to listen to the articles, you can download the MP3 and actually have the article read to you. Back on our LibGuide, we also have a section about history. And two of the ones that I like the most under this particular category are U.S. History in Context and World History in Context. Both of these databases are organized very similarly, so you can browse topics. And if you click on Browse Topics, especially if you're working with a specific historical era, you can scroll down, and most of the time you can find that historical era represented here. So if we're looking for Harlem Renaissance, we can see that there's a category right here. So if you click on that, at the top of the page, you can find an overview of the Harlem Renaissance, and then underneath the overview, you can find specific types of sources. So there's academic journals, primary sources, featured content, reference, biographies, audio, images, video, news, and magazines. So this is very well organized, and it has the same types of tools as the other databases that we were looking at. So for example, if I was working with this particular article, you can see over here there's citation tools, email, download, print, and then you can also share if you would like to. Going back to Browse Topics, you can also look for specific people. Again, this might not be the best strategy. It really depends on what topic you're working with, which cultural movement or specific time period that you're working with, but you can find specific authors listed here as well. For example, there is a section on Langston Hughes, and a lot of this is going to be biography, so you do want to be careful that you're not pulling in information just about his life. But like I said before, Langston Hughes was very much a writer of his time, and so he was writing a lot about different events that were happening while he was writing, so you could find some information that might be useful to you. For example, under primary sources, there's a section called Poetry of Langston Hughes. Another database that I really like is called World History in Context, and this is organized exactly the same way as U.S. History in Context. So I'd want to use this database if, for example, I was working with poems written during World War I and I was researching World War I. Under Browse Topics, you can see that this is organized the same way. We have specific time periods. We also have specific people listed. Here we can see World War I and World War II. So if I click on World War I, this is organized the same way where we have the overview at the top, and then underneath that we have different types of sources. One thing I didn't point out before is that you can see exactly how many articles there are for that particular type of source. So under primary sources, there's 17. Under academic journals, there's 183 different academic journal articles. Under featured content, there's 3 different articles, so on and so forth. So this can be a really useful tool to you if you're researching a specific time period in history and then applying that time period to the poem in order to understand it in a deeper or new way. Back on our LibGuide, there is a section on the left side of the page under databases called General Databases, and I would like to draw your attention to Films on Demand. Films on Demand is a large collection of educational videos, and you can use these as your sources for research. So you can search for Harlem Renaissance, you could search for World War I, and you might find a specific educational video that would be relevant to what you were researching and then applying to the poems. You can use the citation tool on Films on Demand just like you can with the articles on the databases. So you can use that to your advantage and just copy and paste that works cited entry straight from the source directly to your works cited page. I also want to revisit the ebook collections as well. I'm going to focus specifically on EBSCO ebook collection. But I don't want you to rule these out as sources because they can be really useful. So I'm going to stick with the Langston Hughes search. And as you can see, Langston Hughes and the Harlem Renaissance pops up as a very popular search. And then it gives me a list of books that are related to the search terms that I used. If I scroll down, I can see this list. This book is just about the Harlem Renaissance in general, so I can click on that. And then I can get the PDF full text where I can actually have access to the entire book. One thing that I particularly like about ebooks is that you can use the search within tool. So if you're looking for a specific topic, such as Langston Hughes, you can type that in and then you can see where in the book his name appears. And it shows you exactly which page it shows up on. I can see that he shows up on page 319. And I would, of course, want to be a little more specific with what I'm looking for, but you can see that this is a pretty useful tool. You also have very similar tools as you do with the databases. So you can save specific pages, you can email pages to yourself, and it also has the citation tool. So you can see that it gives you this list of citation formats. And you, of course, would want to scroll down and select MLA, but here is where, if you decided to use this book, you could copy and paste this works cited entry and put it directly onto your works cited page. Back on our LibGuide, there are a few other tabs that I'd like to point out. The first one is citing your sources. So under this tab, we have different formats for different types of sources. So there is the MLA format for a book, for a single work in an anthology, journal article in a database, and then a website. There is a link to the Purdue OWL online writing lab that I referenced in the assignment guidelines, so you can click on that link and it will take you to that lab. And then on the top left side of the page is Noodle Tools. Do be careful with this tool. It will create your works cited entries for you. However, there is specific information that you need to have before you visit this website and use this tool. You do run the risk of leaving out essential information, and Noodle Tools might not necessarily catch those errors. Under Get Help, there are different ways that you can contact the reference librarians who are very nice and are very happy to help you. There's Get Help in person, so it has the library hours for the Georgetown campus, Grand Strand campus, and Conway campus. There's Get Help by phone or text, so during operating hours you can call or text. There's Get Help online, where you can actually type a question in and then click Ask Us. And then you can email, so there's the reference desk. Finally, there is the Chat Live with Us, so you can do a live chat with the librarians as long as it's during business hours. There are also a couple other links. There's reference appointments, and then there is BrainFuse, which is our online tutoring center where you can get help with writing or with research, and that is available 24/7. So if the libraries are not on duty, you can always refer to BrainFuse. They will not be familiar with our specific LibGuide or the specific databases that we have, but if you have questions about formatting your documentation properly or integrating sources into your paper, then BrainFuse is a very good resource for you to use. This concludes the research portion of our video lecture. I will encourage you to please ask questions and get help with this paper. It can be a little intense and some students can get very overwhelmed during research. So if at any point in the process you have questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact me or to get in touch with a reference librarian to get some help.